you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited.
I am more than excited that you're here to talk. Sarita is it is the understatement to say she is one of my favorite actresses in the world.
Wow.
That's absolutely heartfelt.
Oh my God.
And I don't mean to, cause you to blush or anything. I was going over her bio, and she has a lot of stuff in her bio, but I'm just going to refer to a couple things just so you have some reference points. She did 3 of Mira Nair's films, Mississippi Masala 1 and 2 others, and you might know her from Homeland. And she has 2 films coming out, The Green Knight and It Will Snow in Venedorm. And then you might recognize her from Hunger Games or Jessica Jones. She works a lot, and you can see her in all sorts of places and stuff. So anyway, that's a tiny bit about Sarita. So Sarita.
Yes.
We could talk about anything. And one of the things that I'm wondering about is, you're so good. What do you do when you act? What sort of things are you aware of doing other than just listening and responding? Is that too big a question?
It's very general, but
well, like when you get a role, like what's the first thing you do?
I call you.
Okay. Sometimes. But what do you do? You read the script obviously, and then
yeah. So it's funny because when I look back afterwards, I realize how much work I've done. But when I'm in it, I always feel I'm never doing enough work. Mm-hmm. Like I'll open the script and only kind of go to my stuff, and then realize much later when I've read the script as a whole, mm-hmm. how my viewpoint has totally changed. And so I think it takes me a while to see the whole picture. I work with you, and then you always calm me down, first of all, because I enter everything feeling a little like they're going to catch me this time or something, that feeling. And also the fear of repeating yourself, but that if you don't repeat yourself, you're not going to be good.
What do you mean by repeat yourself?
You start, in a way, getting roles that are similar because of maybe something you do, and you don't even know what it is, but you sense that you get something maybe different. Say, finally you get like a comedic role, mm-hmm. and you think, it takes a while to realize it's the same approach that you've been doing, but you fear that people are going to be like, oh, she's not that good when she does that. Mm-hmm. You become more aware of yourself. Like at the beginning of your career, you're so much rejection and no one knows you. And there's a freedom in that.
Yeah. Well, when you say that there's a freedom in that, what do you mean? You mean because there's less pressure because they don't know you?
Yeah.
You have less expectations and all that stuff?
Yeah.
How do you manage, because this is one of the things that I'm always fascinated with folks, how do you manage to stay loose when you're in situations where directors are kind of asking things that are maybe highly result oriented or they have a very fixed idea of what they want? How do you manage to navigate that?
Well, first of all, I feel like I've given up on expecting the director to direct actors. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? I think they direct light. Mm-hmm. They're film directors. Mm-hmm. They're not acting directors. And so I gave up that long ago. And I'm a nurturer. So I tend to I want the other person to feel good. So I mm-hmm. won't create a confrontation ever. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But in my own way, I will sneak a lot in.
And does that come, when you're talking about sneaking it in, does it come via like ignoring what they're saying or sort of taking what they're saying and then doing your own thing too?
So depending on the circumstance, if sometimes your ego gets affected by their direction, because sometimes they'll say things like in a negative way, like, no, don't do. And so first I've learned to get over my hurt feelings and not think of them at the time. Yeah. Second, I kind of trust that the director knows there's a better version of what you're doing. So he's right. I always think they're right. I just don't think they're right in how they tell you. So I immediately try to think what go to the result they want, which I know isn't useful for me, and then work backwards and go to some of the work you've taught me, like if there is some kind of activity that could create it instead of me, because I know he wants an emotion.
Yeah.
I'll try that route, but I have to be very tame in that. Or
when you say you have to be tame in it, what do you mean? Like, what
because
do you mean?
Purna was saying this in her interview, they get scared of props, and then the prop master has to come in, and then the sound guy is like, is that going to make noise? You know that's going to happen, right? So to find a way to do it more in a like you talk a lot about physicalizing something.
Yeah.
And I'm very moved. Like I watch a lot of foreign movies, and like, for example, Kurosawa, some of this, there was a movie, I can't remember which one now, that where the character was so broken that his posture throughout the movie kept getting lower and lower.
Yeah.
And often he was shot from the back, and I found it so moving that there's no tears in his eyes. He was not playing his circumstance, but he was doing the circumstance. And it was so moving to me. So I try and do little things like that. Yeah. Like if I'm opening a door with a key, to just pause instead of doing what the director said, which is, Sarita, you're upset when you come in the door.
Right.
I try to transfer it into something because I don't want to be in a soap opera.
Right. Well, let's unpack that a little bit. When you say be in a soap opera, what do you mean exactly by that? I think I know.
Meaning, if they want more of emotion and they give you the direction of it's a little more emotional, like you've got to connect with them. I get what they mean. Yeah. But if I do those literal things with my eyes and my voice, I mean, you told me once that in soap operas, they look at each other all the time. They never look away. And that scared the shit out of me. And so I try not to do that. Although I do.
It is interesting to me. There's such a, I see this happen all the time. I see it with myself sometimes, of course, where it's like we're drawn to we just want to stare in each other's eyes. And I always think of how in real life that would be just so utterly creepy and weird if somebody was just staring at your eyes all the time.
Right, and we're shyer than that.
You're right. Right. That's right. There was Keith Johnstone has a book called Impro, and he talks about that he was just observing people, and he noticed that when people were talking, especially, they tended to look all around. And then when people were in listening mode, they tend to more look at the person, very much the way you are now.
Wow.
Just like you did.
Yeah, just what just happened. Like now I'm speaking, I'm looking out the window. Yeah, you're right. I also find in scripts, like I've noticed in British scripts, they're very detailed in, she walks in the door, she kicks off one shoe and doesn't bother to take off the other. It gives you so much. Whereas in an American script, it's more character written, which is harder for the actor. That makes a lot of sense. I have a question about that for you. I know that you work kind of all over the world, and how is it that the international films happen? In other words, the reason I'm asking is that in America, the casting directors, that I'm familiar with, primarily cast American projects, and how does one begin to work in? It's a good question. I think like anything, you have to fall in love with. I'm obsessed with foreign films, and I feel like once you become obsessed with something, it always lines up somehow. You drop it in conversation, or maybe I don't know how it literally happens, but I also know I'm pretty lazy. Like I don't even have an agent abroad. Yeah. And I keep thinking like, that's crazy, but I don't. And so I think like A.V. Kaufman, who's a casting director, who's amazing, she casts a lot of foreign stuff. And so somehow I must have let her know that I don't know, I speak another language, or I have a British passport, or, you let them know. If I read a book that I'm in love with, I'll somehow let my agent know, just keep your eye out. It's going to be cast from Denmark, but I know it's going to be in English. And I know the agents often are like, here she goes. But something, just the conversation begins something, I feel.
Just putting it out there that you love it and you're interested in it and stuff like that.
Yeah, and like anything, I really love it. So like AD cast me in a German film by a director who I had been obsessed with. So when she called, and it was an odd story. I was buying bread and he was in her office and they couldn't find this character, the person to play it. And then he happened to see a photo of mine that she had. I don't know why she would, for something. And he said, what about her? And she called me on my cell phone. And she said, oh, this is the director, Tom Tykwer. And she proceeded to explain. And I was like, he did a film called Run, Lola, Run. And it blew my mind. Mm-hmm. So I was like, Amy, I know who Tom Tykwer is. And suddenly that process began. But there, on the other hand, that process was a 6-month process of 3 auditions, a screened. I mean, I lost that almost 3 times. Wow. So it's interesting, even though you get better at coming closer, the rigor at which you have to do it is hard because you think you're closer, but you're still doing the same.
Now, when you say you lost it almost 3 times, were you literally getting feedback where they're saying like, well, we're not sure?
Yeah, I was getting feedback that, well, they really want to go Arab and you're not.
Right.
Sarita, if you come in next time and you wear the full headscarf, make sure the accent is not over the top, but also, I mean, it was constantly saying they're looking elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And within that, you still have to kind of get over that, oh no, I'm not going to get it. And it's a weird thing.
Yeah. Yeah. What is, as best as you can recollect, what's the most amount of times you've auditioned for a single project?
Oh my God.
I mean, just a ballpark.
3, but I think 3 is a lot because what happens by the second, you don't have it in you to audition again.
Yeah.
You know you're going to lose it on like you're going to you're going to wear the wrong outfit. You're going to be too nice to the casting director. They can smell it. It's awful the 3rd time.
You've been so fortunate to work with so many amazing people. Do any stand out as people that you found particularly fun and interesting to work with? And specifically, what was it about their working process that made it fun and interesting?
Wow, what a question. Okay. It's funny because you can't tell secrets. Like there's so many, the people you think they would be great are not the great ones. So
yeah. I've noticed that too. It's an interesting thing.
Do you know the ones who I find, like I just worked with Timothy Spall. He was in all of Mike Leigh's movies. Do you know him?
I don't. Who did he play?
Okay, let me think of someone. Oh my God. Oh, perfect. So in Homeland, Mandy Patinkin.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really odd. The first time I met him to do the scene, and I had to play his wife, I remember just thinking, I felt the same way when I first went to university. I remember just thinking, just pretend you are the nicest, coolest person in the world and don't talk. I just remember thinking that. And that's how I behaved for at least a year. We didn't really get to know each other till the 2nd season. But I remember doing a scene with him, and in the scene, I remember looking at him thinking, I don't recognize his lines. Mm-hmm. He's so good that his timing and I didn't recognize the scene. Mm-hmm. And it was so refreshing because I was just responding to his scene. Yeah. And then later I went to look at the scene and I thought, oh, he was totally doing the lines, but I still don't really know. It's happened a few times with Mandy.
Yeah, I know that feeling. That is really amazing. Sometimes I have that feeling when, Porter and I talked about this a little bit, but I've sometimes watched actors that they're rehearsing, before they're shooting, and during the rehearsal, I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't believe how good they are. They are just amazing. And then they start to shoot, and it tightens up a little bit, and you're like, oh. but I always remember to just like pay attention to them. Like, what did they do in that rehearsal? That was unbelievable. It was so good. Have you?
I feel like that when I work with you, when we do scenes and you're just reading for me,
Mhm.
I sometimes feel like, damn, Seth should go in for that role. And I
Should
wonder,
go in for that role.
I wonder how it would be if it was your role, and would you be cognizant of that different, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It is fascinating.
It's funny, you know, like I'm thinking of like, you know, inspiring work can come from the least likely places. I once was acting in one of the first films I ever made, which was so poor, the film.
So
And
what?
poor, it was
Oh,
not good. And my performance was beyond not good. It was,
no, that's not true.
oh no, it's so true. And but what I remember from it is I was shooting this scene, and it was going to be a scene with the producer's wife, and who wasn't an actress. And I kind of went, oh, okay, you know, and I was polite about it, but I thought, this isn't going to go good. And then we did the scene, and she was a nurse, and I was coming in to check in at a hospital for some reason. And the second she opened her mouth, I I I felt like a complete fraud. I mean, she was so utterly real. It just felt like a documentary. Like, this is not an actor at all.
Oh, wow.
And it was just a reminder to me, like, yeah, you know, regardless of what training you've had or experience or anything, inspiration really can come from anywhere. And there's so much to be learned. I've noticed a lot of times when there's films that where parts are played by people who are not actors, that sometimes that goes quite well, and,
Mm-hmm.
and really inspiring stuff that happens. I don't know what that's about exactly, but other than maybe they don't have expectations of what they think they're supposed to do, and so they're freer. I don't know.
I think also maybe they have a lot of bad takes.
A lot of bad takes, is that what you said?
I think it's an editing job also, you know, including us, but
Yes.
I think they're given a space that we're not given as actors. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Do you do both theater and film? Yeah.
Yeah.
And but what percentage would you say is film and television versus?
So in the beginning of my career, it was probably 70% theater, 30 film.
Mm-hmm.
And then it got to 50-50. And then now it's interesting because when you want to do theater, you almost have to fight with your agents to do it.
Right.
And I'm lucky, like obviously they will let me, but there's always it's very tricky. So then you become more particular about what you're choosing. But with theater, you can't, it comes to you. And if you don't say yes or no, the one you want to do isn't going to come to you. So I find that a little tricky. Yeah.
Did you grew up in, your background's complicated. So I know you spent a lot of time in Italy.
Yeah.
But did you grow up there, or did you grow up in England?
I moved there when I was 11. I was in Jamaica till I was 11.
In Jamaica?
Which is an accent I've always wanted to do, never got to. And then moved to Italy when I was 11, yeah.
Okay, and then there until when?
University I did in Canada,
Okay.
but then I would go back and forth to Italy for, to be home.
Where in Canada?
Kingston, Ontario.
Okay. And then did you come to New York after that, or
No, I went to London, and that's where it was like the luckiest story ever. I was working in whatever job, and someone told me that Meera Nair, this Indian director, whose work I'd seen, she'd done Salaam Bombay,
mm-hmm.
and she'd done some documentaries, so I'd seen her work. I was coming and was looking for an actress to play this role, and I somehow managed to get in the audition. I mean, I had to go 3 times for that as well. And she gave it to me over dinner that night and changed my life because she brought me to America.
Okay. And then when you were going to school in Canada, were you studying performing in any capacity?
So if you're a child of an Indian man, that's not what you study. So I studied economics. Um, and then
You enjoyed economics?
no,
No.
not at all. In my third year, I transferred. I fell in love with a guy who was in film school. He persuaded me to call my dad and say, could I do a film degree, but finish economics? So I did 2 degrees in the end, film and acting, and finished my economics somehow. And
so they had a degree that was, you said film and acting. Was it?
So no, it was, so strangely enough, I took film theory because I was heavily into critical theory for some reason. But when we had to make a film, I would join up with the drama department. And then one day I asked if I could take their classes. And so because, like here, the system is you can take electives. And then I kind of started there.
Mm-hmm. So do you have, because you have a British passport, does that also give you a Canadian, can you work in Canada?
No.
Have you ever worked in Canada?
This interview is becoming strange. No.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works, actually. I don't think I've ever worked in Canada. I've done directing things in Canada, but I've never done an acting gig in Canada.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, interesting.
Interesting.
And then do you, when you do the theater you do, I seem to remember once we were talking, and do I remember correctly that you sort of have a background in experimental theater and that kind of stuff?
So it's weird because I feel like I've done the oddest theater. I started with Declan Dolan's group called Cheap by Jowl.
Yes, absolutely.
So I auditioned here for them, but I moved to London for a year because he does the same play for a whole year. Okay. That's how he works. And so I started with him doing Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. And then when I was in America, I was mainly working with Jay Scheib, who does experimental theater, because I'm in love with dance. And so he believes in using classic, like Ibsen, Chekhov, and physicalizing it. Mm-hmm. So he only hires either dancers or people from the circus
You have a dance background? Are you a dancer?
I do. I wanted to be a dancer. I never made it.
Oh, really? What kind of dance?
In Jamaica, it was kind of just modern. And then in Italy, it was classical and modern. But it was in the days, my body changed and they were like, no. Now I could have had a chance.
That's no. Oh, that's just so sad.
I know.
And where in Italy did you live?
In Rome.
Oh, in Rome. What part of Rome?
I
know it a little bit,
Yeah. So my school was in Cerco Massimo, which is near the Colosseum. The Cercos Maximus.
Yep.
But unfortunately, I used to be so embarrassed. We lived in Castelpalocco, which is like the suburbs.
Okay.
So I didn't have to.
And I trust you're obviously fluent in Italian. Or how many languages do you speak?
I feel like when people ask me that, I lie.
No, you don't have to lie. You can tell us the truth.
But I know, I'm realizing I'm in an interview. I speak English and Italian. I speak French, but if I say that, my mom would be like, who's a French teacher, would be like, really? So, but I speak well enough to act in it, I guess, is how I view language now.
I speak English. That's it for me.
You speak what?
English.
English.
Yeah, that's it. It's funny because
that's why you like Canada.
Yeah, right. I studied French in high school enough so that when I traveled, I noticed I would understand about 50%, but it never really got beyond that for me.
Yeah, it's hard, but that's good, 50%.
Well, it's odd. Every once in a while, like if a certain topic is happening, I'll be conversing with someone and I'll start to feel like, oh, maybe I'm actually learning this language. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And then they'll start referring to something and all of a sudden.
I know.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Well, gosh, I'm trying to think. It's probably a good time for us to open this up and just hear what questions, if anybody has any questions. So I'm going to invite people to, if you do have a question, go ahead and you can either type it into the chat screen there, or you can raise your hand in that digital way, and we'll call on you. And while we're waiting for those to happen, I'll just ask some other questions too. I am this is a silly question, but I am a big laugher when I'm working. Like I will sometimes, especially if I'm in a situation where I'm comfortable, and I will like go on these jags where I cannot stop laughing.
I love that. I didn't know that about you.
Absolutely. And I was just wondering if that ever happens to you or not.
Oh, that's so, you mean you're saying when you're on a set?
Yeah, we're doing a scene, and it's sometimes, like part of it is that I on a good day, I really let my mind wander and bounce around to whatever the hell it wants to. And sometimes, somebody will say something and it will just something about it will strike me funny, or, and I'm just gone. And then I cannot, and it's usually in these scenes that are like the most serious, things.
So great. That's because you're so open. I don't think,
well,
I don't, that's so interesting. I
I
definitely don't have that.
Yeah. It's funny.
I love that though.
Some of us are it's mostly I actually enjoy it, and I'm glad that it happens every once in a while. There's a time where I'm like
when you're working on Billions, do you have that?
Oh my God.
Oh, but you must have.
Paul Giamatti and I are like,
Paul.
He laughs a little, like when he's actually acting, he laughs a little less than I do, for sure. But oh my God, we'll just start like crying with laughter in between, because we share a really similar sense of humor, and then
oh, I can just see that, especially with Paul.
To, like, play the scene, and Paul's managing to just kind of do his thing, and I'm just so gone.
So in a weird way, you end up failing because he pretends to be with you, and then you're left.
I don't like to think of it as failing.
You know what it is? Paul also is he's such a generous guy, right?
Yeah. He is very much.
Whenever when he shares a joke with you, you feel really like he's with you.
No,
so then if he then suddenly is ready for the scene and you're not, it's like.
What was the name of that? You did a movie with him. What was the name?
I did Lady in the Water. He's somebody I would say I learned a lot from, because he's got this odd quietness, but he is funny and he's cheeky and he's so alive.
Very much.
But yeah, he's also very private. Like, I wanted to be more like him,
You mean as a person or as
Yeah, because he seems free, and yet he also seems to have these privacy.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I see that Elsa Bergman has a question. So Elsa, I'm going to ask you to encourage you to turn on your video camera for a second, and Porter will unmute you, and then we can.
Am I unmuted? I might just keep myself off because I don't know.
Yeah, you're unmuted.
Am I unmuted?
Or yeah.
Am I on speaker? Like, do you hear me?
We can hear you. I can't see you, but.
No, I'm just afraid that I have like green stuff, like around my face. So.
Did you say green stuff?
Yeah.
This question is getting more intriguing by the moment. So, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I have like two questions, really. I mean, I'm curious to hear actually about, and then I realized this was recorded, so feel free to not maybe go in detail. But I was grateful to hear this about the fraud thing, about feeling like now they're gonna catch me. And I was wondering, like, how much. I was just curious to hear about the relationship with your agent. And not really how it came to be about, but kind of what conversations do you have with it, and what kind of conversation do you keep out, and in that, like, how important is trust, or like how,
with your agent, you're saying?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Because that's your.
It is. Yeah. Backup. So I feel like, at the beginning of your career, you don't have as much control over who your agent is or the relationship you have with them, because you're so grateful to have one. I think that was the harder part for me, is early on. But I remember when I changed agents, I went from a big agency to a smaller one, because I felt like I don't know, I was getting not ignored, but like they didn't really get me at the other one. So I remember going to check out other agencies, and the one I settled on, one of the reasons is my agent, who's my agent now. I just really liked him, and I felt he really heard me when I was talking, and in fact that's carried on through. So I have a really good relationship with him, but that wasn't always the case throughout my career.
Okay.
And I don't think it's the case for a lot of people. So it's an interesting question you're asking, because it should be that, but I feel if you talk to most actors, they don't feel that.
Yeah, but do you feel like, and do you feel like you can be insecure in that position?
When I'm talking with him?
Yeah.
Yes. But that's taken a while, and we've reached that point, and I have to say it's my biggest piece that I have, because when you're not feeling secure with your agent, I mean, we're already second guessing ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
That adding that to it is really hard.
Yeah. But yeah, because that was the insecurity I kind of mean, like, how much do you share?
Yeah. So now I can share everything, whereas I would say before, no.
Yeah. And then I was just kind of curious to hear about if you have any regrets, professional regrets.
Professional regrets. Mostly, I mean, it's funny because.
Or if you have, and if you deal, how do you deal with it? Or yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's the obvious ones of when you don't get a role that you are in love with, which hasn't happened that much, because I have to say, we don't get like a huge amount of scripts that are so amazing that we're so in love with them. But it's happened twice to me that I've lost a role to someone, and it's been super hard. On the other hand, I once had to turn down something for a personal reason. And I remember leading up to turning it down, I felt so tangled and like, how am I going to not do this? And once I said I couldn't, I never worried about it again. So I realized I don't think I'm someone who regrets much, but I definitely have a struggle on the way there,
Yeah.
Wow.
How awesome.
Gosh, thank you also.
Thank you so much. And I mean, I forgot to say thank you in the beginning. Lovely.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks also. I see David DeBeck, my friend, has his hand up, and so we'll unmute David's mic. And what's up, David? What's your question?
Hi, thank you, Seth, and hi, Sarita. Thank you so much. This was really interesting so far. I've really enjoyed it. I had a question for you, and if you had any advice for, often I'm like doing a day or 2 days or 3 days on a TV or film, and what do you look for from a day player or co-star coming on who you really haven't met, and maybe it's a loaded scene and you haven't had much time because of schedule, and what like from that actor who comes on and you haven't had time, what's a good approach that
that's such a good question, because I feel like one thing I've noticed recently especially is that, because like I said, I'm a bit of a nurturer, I'm always, when someone is new on set and you've been on set longer, I feel like they're always in a position, A, it's a smaller role they have, B, they don't know the set, they don't know the people. We all seem cliquey, and it must be so weird. And I've been in the same position many a time, so I know how it feels. But one thing I've noticed is often they're really good actors, because, who gets the bigger role or not often doesn't have to do necessarily just with talent. So I find the ones who just do the work and are just kind are the ones I'm like, oh my God. the ones who are nervous and then want to talk too much and like, they throw me because then I'm like, not sure why that's happening. But what I've noticed most is work is always seen. And
work is always seen, did you say?
yeah, good work is always seen.
Oh, uh-huh.
No matter how small the role, like, you know how you'll just see it. Likewise, like I won't give away much, but I had to do a scene with a guy who came in and he was so nervous that he kept flubbing his lines.
Right.
And I realized the only way to help him was to like almost lie to him and say he was really good. And he became so good that when I saw the scene, he's better than me.
Yeah.
He had a quiet sensitivity. And I thought, oh my God. So, but it was a pain in the ass because I knew he was flubbing lines only from nerves.
Right.
And I know I've done that before. But I think if he had just said to me, I'm so nervous, I don't know what to do, that would have been so much easier than him not saying it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
No, it's helpful to know that, yeah, you pretty much just focus on the work and
yeah,
everything will take care of
itself. I feel like everyone is insecure, but the one thing that's noticed when someone just does something normal and good, everyone kind of sees it, and it's a beautiful moment when that happens. Because often the people who are like regulars on a TV show, they're a little bored. Yeah. They're not looking at every scene as the scene. And so, whereas I remember when I had this small role, I was like, I've been working on that scene for so long, and I was so excited, but I never felt that energy when I arrived to the scene.
Right.
They looked like they hadn't even looked at the lines. They were like, oh, I was always confused by that. Yeah. But it's just because they're working in every scene.
It's always strange when you show up on a set and what you had in your mind about the scene, what it's supposed to look and the location and the circumstances are completely different. And you're like, always. Whoa, where are we?
Yeah. And if you don't have the lead, you're not allowed to ask about it.
You don't have the whole script. You basically have had maybe your sides. Yeah.
Totally.
I think it's so much harder. I've been lucky enough to land on both sides of this in some work where sometimes I'm the guy who's hanging around a lot, and then sometimes I'm a day player or a small part. And I think it's so much harder to do that day player stuff.
Oh,
yeah. It really is.
Oh, yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. That was great. Thanks, David.
Thank you very much.
That is a great question.
I love your work. I'm a huge fan.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
And Sam Morrison, I see you have a question. And so.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you're preparing for like a huge theater production, you have to perform for the back row. And if you're performing for like a single camera, super intimate, the smallest gesture means the biggest thing. Does your process change?
Yes. Well, first of all, I feel like because theater has at least, if you're lucky, 4 to 6 weeks rehearsal, I feel like in that process, I gain intimacy with projecting, but it takes me personally a long time.
Right.
And often directors tell me that, and I really have to work on it. I find camera work, that process was very natural to me for some reason. But projecting and keeping a truthfulness to what you're doing, it takes me, I would say by the 3rd week of rehearsal, 4th week. And I still get told off even in tech, or previews. I find that hard.
That's interesting. For me, I think of it with the exception of volume issues. I always think of all the rest of it as the same. There's nothing really different for me. And usually the way I found it best for myself to navigate the volume stuff is I I'll have a conversation with somebody while we're in a space, and then I'll have them walk up to the back row, and I'll just be talking with them. And what happens is, as they get to the back row and I'm talking with them, I sort of realize this is what's needed for me in this space to be heard, not because I'm projecting, but because I'm actually conversing with somebody that far away. That's something I've done that's been helpful. But it's funny.
It's
a lot
also
of people,
useful.
yeah,
It's
sure.
useful because it makes you a better actor. Like the circumstances, everything has to be very clear for your voice to do that.
Yeah. Well, great, Sam. Thank you for that question. And Neeraja Ramjee has a question I can see. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I have no idea.
Neeraja, almost there.
Go ahead.
Hi, Sarita. First
Hi.
of all, I love your work, and I'm
Thank
sorry
you.
I look like crap right now, but I had a question about the audition process. You know, a lot of times we walk into an audition and you get a call back, and then you come back in there, and I find that, you know, you walk in, you get a call back, but you're not really booking the role. What is it that, when you walk into the audition room, what is it that's different or unique, and how do you make those choices or determine what those different choices can be when you go into the audition room to actually book the gig? I know it's a bit of a black hole, but just wanted to get your perspective on how you prepare for it as you get in there to book the role.
Yeah. Oh my God. I feel like I have the question you have still. So I don't think that feeling goes away, because, you know, anyone's career is the things you see them book, but not all the things that I've been rejected for, you know, like, so a few things in having auditioned a lot, what I've noticed is getting the role does begin from how you handle yourself and your nerves or whatever from the waiting room into the room, etc. And because each of those circumstances change, you can't pick something that helps you. So it's a very, I think, very deep work. It's almost the same as if, you know, you have a crush on someone. How do you get them to like you? It just doesn't make sense to approach anything that way. So I feel I can usually tell from how I am in the waiting room what's going to happen in the room, because sometimes from the work I've done, and, you know, like Purna mentioned in her interview, I work with Purna a lot before I go to audition or do work, and just to make sure the lines are so down that that's not my problem. And also, Purna and I have no ego with each other for some reason, which is so strange, because I've tried to work with other actors and I always either get offended by what they say or I offend them. For some reason, we have this, she'll just say like, no, or we have no problem. I've even said to Purna, what are you doing? I'll do it. Watch me. Like, we are so rude to each other. But, so now I've realized if I can be calm in the waiting room, it means I've done the work. But if something is bugging me in the waiting room, then I have to do some weird kind of Grotowski method breathing stuff because I can feel you know, when you can feel your heart beating and you're like, this never happens. What is this thing? Number one, I realized the people in the room are not only hiring you as an actress, they're also hiring you to either promote the movie or to be a normal person. They want to make sure you're not crazy. And sadly, when we're nervous, we seem a little crazy. Like, they say, oh, how are you? And you're like, oh my God, and you tell them too much. And you're like, why did I just tell them so much? I feel like I am below zero normal in the room. And I try and put all the work in the acting, because I don't trust my personality and all the nerves I have. And I usually ask them about them, or I'm just super kind. Because anytime I try and show that I'm funny or I'm quirky, it never works. It's just like having a crush. Like, they see through it. So the work is your only anchor. And And I know I'm not really helping you because I still have the same problem you're asking me. You know what I mean?
Well, it may be, I think what's helpful is just to hear that you have that issue and you know, some of the ways that you navigate it. It's funny that one of the things that I've noticed is that as I get older, I care less. You know, if I get a job or I don't get a job, it's really, you know, we're in the middle of a virus. That's important. And there's people dying. And that's sometimes if I find myself all wrapped up in anxiety and stuff, I'll just turn my attention, you know, to what's really important in the world. And it certainly ain't whether I get a part or not.
Yeah.
That's sometimes
so true. Oh, that's so true. But you know, it's a strange exchange. Like we want something from them, you know, and they're going to decide whether to give it to us. It's just already imbalanced. So it's almost like it's already imbalanced. You're probably going to get rejected anyway. Just fucking do it. Like, honestly, I just always think that I'm going to get rejected anyway, you know? And I think also you do have to pick moments. Purna mentioned this also. Just one personal moment, because we all do something that someone else doesn't do. And whatever that is, whether it doesn't even have to be in the work, but don't ever try and be like anyone else because you're not going to be anyway. And if you look at the top actors, none of them are the same. None of them are that stunning. It's really interesting. The ones who really make it are not the ones, you know, that you would think when you're young, looking at how you should look or dress or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of them are stunning.
Some are stunning, yeah. But I hope that answered a bit.
Yeah. That was a great question. Thank you. Oh, okay. Your thumbs up that is, you're muted, but yes, that's good. You did it, Sarita. Success. Well, believe it or not, that brings us to an end to our time together.
Aww, so sweet.
It just went by so quick, right?
It did.
I am really grateful to everybody for joining in and participating on this. We're doing this every Wednesday. Next Wednesday, our guest will be Allison Wright.
This is cool.
Have you worked with Allison before, Sarita?
Yeah, I did a play with her.
Yeah. Was that the play that that she did was it at the New Group?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Sabrina was in it. Yeah.
Good. Anyway, she'll be here next week, and please come in and join us on that. Also, we have various programming going on through the week. If you go to beargroup.org, you can see what the free programming is. And of course, we have our, you know, all of our normal classes and everything that are now all online because of what's going on. But I'm so glad you all participated and came around.
Thank you.
And Sarita, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh my God, you're good at this, Seth.
Well, no,
I was nervous, but I didn't even notice the time. Yeah, it was great.
Good. It's all good. All right, be well and be healthy, everybody, and have a great week or day or whenever we next see you. Take it easy.
Take it easy. Bye.